convinced that in a few years, I don't know if it is 10 years or less or more, we will have the obligation to return and help these African countries. It is not China, Russia, and Wagner who will bring sustainable solutions to the very great difficulties that these African countries and their populations know.
I am convinced in a few years, I don't know if it's going to be in 10 years, but we will have an obligation to go and help these African nations. As an African, if you hear a French general talking like this, how do you feel as a leader in Africa or as a citizen of Africa? It is so annoying when you listen to these European colonial criminals talking about Africa. It is as if like they own Africa. It is their property. And anytime they want, they should come in and do whatever they want and leave. The other day we heard Prince talking about how they should put on their colonial cap, come back and recolonize Africa if we cannot look after ourselves. And today this guy is also talking about it is an obligation for them to come in and save Africa from what? From their own destruction, for their own criminal activities in Africa. I want us to go and watch the full video about the nonsense this guy is talking about. Anyway, I am your missionary brother Dobia Anzanse. We are on a mission. We are Pan-Africans, and our mission is all about the unification of the African continent and the dignity of the African race. What can we do to bring an end to this nonsense that these guys are? Like, sometimes when you hear them talking, it's mind-boggling. It's so annoying when you hear these European colonial criminals talking about Africa. Why are they not saying the same thing about China? Why are they not saying the same thing about India? Why? Why is it that when it comes to Africa, they talk with arrogance? They speak as if like they own Africa. Africa is their property. Why do we, when enough is going to be enough for we, the children of Africa, to stand up and fight for our dignity as children of Africa? That is what we are calling on the youth of Africa, the citizens of Africa, to stand up and fight for a united Africa, because it is only unity that can bring an end to this level of disrespect coming from these European colonial criminals. Let us go and watch the full video, come back and analyze it.
Former Chief of Staff of the French Army's General Lecointre has announced a military recolonization of Africa by France and Europe in the next 10 years. This statement has caused widespread concern and controversy, with many people expressing their opposition to the idea of European countries once again exerting their influence and control over African nations. The announcement comes at a time when there is already significant unrest and instability in many parts of Africa, particularly in the Sahel region. Some experts argue that the withdrawal of French troops from the Sahel could fuel neo-colonial fantasies and pave the way for further military interventions by European powers. General Lecointre does not beat around the bush. The withdrawal from the Sahel is a failure for France, Europe, and Africa. He affirms that Europe must defend its interests on the African continent and be capable of taking charge of its destiny on a military level. General Lecointre's arguments in favor of military intervention in the Sahel region are nothing more than a thinly veiled attempt to justify France's desire to regain its influence over the region by force. His claims of destruction of government and state apparatuses, civil war in many countries, and difficulties linked to developments in climate are simplistic and lack nuance. Furthermore, his assertions about the demographic explosion of the African continent and its supposed consequences for Europe are unfounded and misleading. It is clear that General Lecointre is attempting to mask his true motivations behind these flimsy arguments. Rather than addressing the root causes of the conflicts in the Sahel, he is advocating for a military solution that would only lead to further violence and instability in the region. The following video contains a statement made by General Lecointre pertaining to the proposed military recolonization of Africa. The video is in French, however. A translated version is provided for clarity. What is our common destiny as Europeans is the Mediterranean and Africa, where our destiny is at stake. And so we, the French, have constantly tried to train the Europeans in this awareness of the need to act collectively in Africa and the Mediterranean.
absolument désolé.
And I am absolutely sorry to see the failure of our commitments to the Sahel.
De toute façon, nous aurons à nous reposer la question.
And I think that in any case, we will have to ask ourselves the question,
Nos portes, un continent
because we cannot imagine having at our doors an entire continent that is plunging into the destruction of government and state apparatus, plunging into a form of civil war chaos in many countries and more countries, in difficulties that are linked to climate change, which are even more dramatic on vulnerable populations, such as African populations. In addition, a continent that is going to experience a demographic explosion like no other continent has ever experienced. And so imagine that this is happening here in the next 10 to 20 years, and that it will have no consequences on Europe, because we live in a kind of bubble protected by, I don't know what else. It is simply unconscious. And so I think that this common interest should one day make Europe decide to act as a political entity that will defend its own interests, including by means of the commitment of its armies. The withdrawal of the Sahel was difficult to accept for all those who were involved. I am the first to have a lot of trouble swallowing that. It is a French, European, and African failure, which mainly stems from what we have not understood, which is that the action should be a global action. The restoration of the state, the return of the administrations, the return of development. And if we cannot do all this simultaneously and in a coordinated way, we will fail. That's what happened. What I have trouble swallowing is when I am told that it is the failure of a military operation. The reality is that it is not the failure of a military operation. The military operation was a dimension. I am convinced that in a few years, I don't know if it is 10 years or less or more, we will have the obligation to return and help these African countries. It is not China, Russia, and Wagner who will bring sustainable solutions to the very great difficulties that these African countries and their populations know.
Yeah, so this man is talking about Europe's interest in Africa. Europe must defend their interest in Africa. You see, these people, it is always about their interest, and their interest. And when is Africa going to defend her own interests? All the time, people are talking about how they want to help Africa. But in reality, they are talking about their own interests. Everybody has a solution to the continent of Africa, except the only people who doesn't have the solution to the continent of Africa are we, the citizens of Africa. Why? Why? And as we keep saying, it is our lack of unity as children of Africa. If we want to have the strength to defend our sovereignty as Africans, then we must unite the continent of Africa. The only way we can bring an end to the bullying, the disrespect coming from these European colonial criminals, is by uniting the continent of Africa. If not, we can never compete with them. They divide Africa, intentionally divide Africa to keep Africa at the bottom of the human race, so that they will continue to be speaking nonsense about Africa like the way this guy is talking about here. So my question is, when is enough is going to be enough for we, the children of Africa? When are we going to put aside our so-called differences, whatever differences we may think we have? When are we going to put it aside and come together for the collective good of all of us? When? Because these people, they never hide their intentions towards us. No. And you know what they're doing that? Because there is a spiritual reasons behind that. Karma. Before they want to do something bad to you, they will first of all have to inform you so that you will know about it. So that eventually when they do it to you, they will not pay for the sins that they committed against you. So if you watch or study them carefully, anything that they intend to do to you, they'll first of all inform you. So if this general is talking about them in 10 years time or 20 years, whatever, they have to come back, and it is their obligation for them to, it is an obligation for them to come back and help free Africa from what? The other day, as I said, Prince was talking about that. what's his name? That guy in Israel, Netanyahu, was also talking about them coming to help Africa. Everybody want to help Africa. From what? From their own criminal activities going on in our continent. The only people who doesn't have solution to our own problems is we, the children of Africa. And I'm asking, when are we going to bring an end to this? Why are they not saying the same thing about China? Because the Chinese have waken up 50 years ago, 60 years ago. They would have said the same thing about China. But today they dare not. They could have said the same thing about India even 10, 20 years ago. But today they cannot say that about India. Because the Indians have realized that they have to take their destiny, their own destiny, into their own hands. The Chinese have done that. And today, militarily, economically, they are competing. The Chinese are competing with the West without resources. The kind of resources that we have as children of Africa. Imagine, that's why we are calling on for a united Africa. That is why we are calling on for the unity of Africa. The kind of resources, the human resources. He talked about our human resources, the population of Africa. And they are so concerned about the population of Africa as well. I don't know why these people, they are so concerned. Like European people, Africans having, at the age of 20 years, Africans having 7 children.
You in Africa, when you are 20 years old, you have 7 children. In Europe,
the population of Africa going to be this. The population, we don't talk about them. We don't care about them having children or them not having children. But they are so concerned about the continent of Africa. Why do we allow these people to reduce us like this as Africans? It is us as children of Africa. It is our duty to make sure that we bring an end to this, so that future generation of Africans will not be facing the same thing that we are facing today. And the only way we can do that is by uniting the continent of Africa. It is only unity that can bring an end to this disrespect coming from these Europeans. I thank you very much for coming around. As I said, we are missionaries. We are on a mission, and our mission is to undo what King Leopold and his missionaries did to we, the citizens of Africa. So if you appreciate what we are doing, please don't hesitate to subscribe to our YouTube channel, to support us, and also follow us on Facebook, on TikTok, One African Mission. Support our mission. Let us all together fight to bring an end to the disrespect and to this potential neo-colonialism for the continent of Africa. We cannot afford to leave the same Africa, a colonized Africa, for the next generation of Africans. We cannot afford to do that. We cannot afford to leave a colonized Africa for the next generation of Africans. As I keep saying, our ancestors didn't know best. They didn't know better. Today we know better. And then we have to bring an end to that. And it is our duty to do that. And we have the chance never before afforded to any generation of Africans to bring a change to the continent of Africa. We can do it together. Let us support the unity of Africa. That is the only way we can bring an end to the disrespect and the dehumanization of the African continent and the African race. I thank you very much for coming around.